Hi, my name is Rosetta Cheers. I'm the Chief Steward for ASME Local 3800 at the University of Minnesota. And today I'll be presenting Module 12 in the training series for stewards entitled Performance Appraisals. This is a pre-recorded info session that was given to members so that they can prep for their performance appraisal. And this will be useful to stewards as you help them navigate what their rights are. In addition, you will find in the module folder on the Google Drive additional information and documents that you can use to help a member prepare for their performance appraisals. So again, I'm Rosetta Cheers. I'm the Chief Steward of the local. I work in the master's program at the School of Social Work, housed under the College of Education and Human Development. I have been an employee of the University of Minnesota for 20 years in the same position, and I currently work under my fourth director for this program. So I've only held this one position, but I have now worked under 4 directors. And so, of course, this means that, needless to say, I've had my share of performance appraisals and attending performance reviews or appraisals, and I will use those words interchangeably. Appraisal and review, they mean the same thing. So I've had my share of those, but I do know that it can raise a person's anxiety and bring on stress. And sometimes for even some people, it brings on panic attacks. And I do want to pause to let you guys know, if you can't see my full screen on your screen, if you go up to the top of your screen and you'll see that little green bar that has the ID number, it'll give you the option. If you do a drop down, it will say fit to screen, and you can do that as an option so that you can see the presentation in its entirety. So today I am going to present on this very topic, which we're going to talk about, which is performance appraisal and how to make yours work for you. So our objectives for today, by the end of this info session, I am hoping that you leave having the knowledge to be better prepared for your upcoming performance review or for next year's performance review if you've already had yours for this year. And I just want to say, as a little girl, I remember I grew up watching Schoolhouse Rock. And every Saturday when they started each episode on Saturday, they always started off by telling us knowledge is power. And so that's what I want to say to you today, that hopefully the knowledge that you gain today will give you the power and the tools you'll need to have an effective performance review. So we will define what a performance appraisal review is and its objectives. We will explain the purpose of having a performance appraisal review and when a performance appraisal review will take place. We'll talk about best practices, your rights before, during, and after performance appraisal, and then things for you to remember, and then we'll have question and answers if there are still some. So you might ask, what is a performance review? In order for a performance appraisal or review to be effective, it has to address performance and accomplishments, and it should cover objectives. And the objectives in a performance review, it shouldn't just address what a supervisor feels an employee is not meeting expectations, but it also should identify areas where the employee shows that they are doing well. One thing that they teach you in constructive feedback is that you don't start with the negative. So for example, for a supervisor to say in a performance review, Rosetta does not pay attention to detail and she consistently makes numerous mistakes in very important documents, but she does meet deadlines. Suddenly meeting the deadlines carry no positive weight because they put so much negative before the positive so that it almost becomes non-existent. And it should provide an overall performance rating, but it should also be written objectively, and it should set goals to work towards the next performance review. So it should be laying the groundwork for setting your future goals and objectives so that by the time you have the next performance review, you have something that you're working towards. So what it should not have, this is very important, What a performance appraisal should not, and I emphasize not, have issues that involve discipline. For example, if I have an oral warning because of my low level of achieving accuracy in my work, it should not then be mentioned that I have an oral warning and address the discipline in my performance review. One, because the oral warning stays in my file for 1 year, but mentioning it in my review makes it ever present in my file for the duration of my employment, because performance reviews, as I will mention again later, it stays in your personnel file until the end of your career at the U. Something that's not on this screen, but I wanted to note this and make it important to you all to know, is that I want to also mention here, it also applies to those who may have an active Family Medical Leave Act that we refer to as FMLA. In no way, shape, form, reason, manner, whatever word works for you, should a supervisor or manager make mention of a person's FMLA in a performance review. If I have an FMLA due to a mental health issue, which causes me to have periodic episodes in the morning, which may also cause me to be up to an hour late coming to work when I have those accommodations under FMLA, then my supervisor cannot address my tardiness. And those tardies, as FMLA protected, cannot be used against me in addressing my performance in the review, nor can it be done to me in a disciplinary manner. So it's important to know that. So I want to implore to you to pay close attention to be sure your supervisor isn't walking on thin ice, so to speak, by slipping something similar in the performance review and masking it by the way in which they write the words. So you want to be very mindful as you're looking at your review to make sure that they're not wording stuff to kind of sugarcoat it. The purpose of a performance review, this is an easy thing because this is an agreement that our union renegotiates our contract every 2 years, and the agreement that both the union and the university have on what they believe the purpose of a performance appraisal should be has not changed from contract to contract, and it should always include the following. And I'm not going to read those to you, you can look at it, but one thing we want to make sure is clear is that a performance appraisal is not one-sided. It takes both the employer and the employee engaging in a give and take discussion of the goals. As the employee, you have the right to voice what goals you would like to achieve. When there are areas of performance that needs improvement, it is the role of the supervisor to also discuss ways in which the improvement can be achieved. And you, in turn, bring to the discussion what you need from the employer to achieve improvement in the areas that they identify as having a deficit. So don't go in there expecting that you have to have all the answers or that you have to respond to those things. If they're talking about your performance, it's not about just going in there and telling me what I didn't do and what I'm not doing, telling me what the problem is, and then you're not presenting a solution or opening the discussion for a solution. Give us something to work with, basically give you something to work with. Don't just, and then if they do come in with suggestions, I want to know, don't just take their suggestions that they give you. Have a discussion about it, because what they might suggest may not be the best recourse for you, because your learning style or your work behavior or your work style might be different. The way you comprehend or the way that you execute things might be a little different. So make sure you have that discussion, because they might suggest something that really doesn't work in your favor, and then you can counter with, well, what about if I did it this way? So we want to keep that in mind. And then remember that the feedback needs to be constructive. And then we also want to make sure that you remember to encourage and develop a plan for your own development and growth. So try to find ways to promote your employee development. If you know about a training or a workshop or course that you're interested in taking, present it at the performance review, and that make it part of one of your goals. And this will be something that you get to do, in preparation for the review for next year. And even if you feel like it doesn't directly pertain to your position, believe me, any training that's out there, you can find a way that it can help you grow in development. So it may not be a direct training of a duty that you have on your job, but any trainings that the university offers, it can help you to become a well-rounded employee. So don't just always look for trainings that you think pertain directly to your position. I will address this in a few minutes, but knowing the time period for which the performance appraisal is to be addressed is important. If any comments in your review address issues or performance or incidents that happen outside the parameters of the performance review dates, it's not applicable and it should be removed from your appraisal. So if you get your appraisal and it's supposed to be from January 2019 through December 2019, but they're giving you your review in April of 2020, and they're bringing up stuff you did in February and March of 2020, it's irrelevant to that performance review, and you should immediately ask that it be removed. And as I mentioned earlier, the performance appraisal remains in your personnel file for your entire career at the university. So it is incredibly important that the appraisal is accurate. So you want to make sure you are watching for inaccuracies in your personnel file. And I just want to stop. Do we have any questions so far, Sarah?
Ellie has a question. Do you prefer Ellie to say it yourself, or do you want me to read it?
Ellie can say it herself. And I hope I used the right
No, thank you. No, I was just curious that, you know, the performance appraisal shouldn't be a time for surprises, right? Like, for example, if there is an issue with a particular, you know, thing that you're doing, you should be told at the time that it's an issue, right? No surprises, really.
Correct, which I will get to that. But yes, basically, that's why we talk about things not being, you know, disciplinary in nature being in there. Because if it's a problem that issue that they've had before, they should have already been addressing it with you through coaching or problem solving. So yes, it should not be any surprises in there. And if they do put something in there, they also need examples to back it up. But even if they do that, again, you can say, well, this is the first that this has been brought to my attention. And I think that we need to remove this and enter into problem solving or have a one-on-one to discuss strategies in order for us to think of ways for me to improve in that area, because I haven't gotten a chance to show improvement because it was never brought to my attention. So how can you then rate me that I haven't improved on it?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so now we will address ways to be sure your appraisal is accurate. This really takes work on your part as one receiving the review to be able to identify when something is amiss. Oh, am I going the wrong way? I'm so sorry, you all. This is, got to get on. So this is what we're going to talk about, your accuracy, reflecting your performance. So we're going to give some best practice tips. And there are some practice tips to get you started in prepping for your review. Your job description does define your duties. So you want to be sure to have your most current job description available to you so you know what is expected of you. If it is not accurate, work with your supervisor to get it updated. Do not allow your supervisor to review you on job duties that were not listed on your job description for the period being reviewed. And this is a perfect example of, again, if it's from January 1st of 2019 through December 2019, and again, you were asked to take on someone else's duties for a month or so, whatever, that wasn't part of your job description, so you shouldn't be evaluated on that. If it's going to become a permanent part of your job description, then they need to write a new job description and then evaluate you on it the next time. So make sure you be careful on things like that. Don't allow them to review and be rating you on things that might not even be in your job description or may not be part of your job duties. And if you do find that is the case, you request that it be removed from your written review. And then knowing what is expected of you to make it easier to identify when you're being evaluated on something that shouldn't be addressed. So again, this is why it's important that you know what your job description says. And again, if this happens, that they're putting stuff in here that's not part of your job, you weren't hired to do that, that's not what it said when they hired you, they've never changed it, then anything they put in there, it becomes arbitrary. So you can ask again that it be removed. And I did mention earlier, and I'll bring it up again, to know the time period for which you're being evaluated on this performance, and it should only include your complete and up-to-date job description. I had someone whose job description did just a performance review, did just that one time. And so she wrote me, she hadn't had a review in a few years. The department was getting on her supervisor that they hadn't done reviews. They wanted them to do the reviews. So they were going to go back and do 2 years worth of reviews because the third one was coming up. And when they did the 2 previous years reviews, they were bringing up all this stuff that she had done in the last year because this particular supervisor had only been the supervisor for the last year. And so we grieved it. It was like, no, you're going to toss this out. This is invalid. It's irrelevant. You have to redo it because her job description, the last time you updated her job description was 2009. So you're going to have to go by whatever is on 2009. And they were doing it for the period of 2016 and 2017, but they hadn't updated her description. So we were able to get them to throw it out. HR agreed with us and told them they had to do it over. So it can be done. And then talking about FMLA, when I mentioned that before, I had someone contact me who had a performance review whose supervisor did make mention of her tardiness due to FMLA. And immediately I called HR and I told them, look, this is what this performance review has. It cannot be in there. And HR said, all right, I'm going to have them rewrite this and remove it. I said, well, when they do that, I want you to send me another copy so that I know it's been removed. And so we made it happen. So again, just go ahead and be mindful as you're looking at your stuff to make sure you're keeping up with this. Because I mean, you can't even judge people on evaluating, even if it's the last 2 months. It's supposed to be the totality of the year. You know, I might be doing good all the way to January to November, and then I may have had a crisis or something which caused my performance to slip a little bit. It could be a plethora of reasons why someone's performance has changed. So if the performance is for an annual review, it didn't say a 2-month review. So don't allow them to start interjecting the most recent incidents in your performance review. Tell the totality of my performance for the year. We also want to talk about your review should document pattern of work behavior with specific examples. And again, don't let your supervisor address one incident as a way of evaluating your overall performance. If the supervisor wants to mention an incident and then they want to back it up with examples of how you overcame or began to improve in that area, then that's a positive spin on the performance and it could actually work in your favor. But if they're just putting it in there to say that you did this wrong or you're not meeting up to this expectation, then you can request that it be taken out because they're not giving specific examples. But if they talk about how you have improved, that is a positive spin and you may want to keep that in there because it could work for your advantage. And remember, this is your time to exalt yourself and share contributions you've made to the department. Let's be real. Most times the supervisors don't even know half of what we do or what our work entails. Nobody knows your job like you know your job. And they're not always going to know your special accomplishments. So if you have emails, notes, cards, etc., from people that thanked you for helping or assisting them or speaking to your welcoming or customer service manner, or, you know, just your bubbly personality or how you just jump in or go above you, any of those things that you have, you make sure you bring them to the review. And if you somehow forget to bring them to review, still pull them so that you can have them attached to your review. And then by all means, if you, again, see inaccuracies, demand that it be corrected. You have that right. And this can be done right in the performance appraisal meeting and be retyped afterwards. That has happened to me, not here at the U, but at a previous job. I disputed stuff right there, then and there, and I gave examples because they didn't give examples of why they were giving me that rating, but I gave examples of why my rating shouldn't be that way. And because I had specific examples, they rewrote it, and then we met again. I read through it, and then I signed it. You also could do a problem solving, or if worst case scenario, you can let the union know and we can file a grievance. Sarah, is there any questions so far?
I will take one just because I think it's relevant to what you're talking about, and that is like what recourse does an employee or a worker have if their supervisor has basically like violated everything you're talking about so far? So like how can people actually dispute a performance review that didn't follow the guidelines and expectations?
If it's violating what we said in the contract and what the university has, has said that it is, I tell them to contact the union because, usually people don't per se grieve a performance review, but we can grieve the things that's in it that are violation. So tell them if they feel like it's like that, I would contact a steward right away. And, and we'll cover that again later, that, we want you to know that the union is there for you. You should reach out right away to us and see what it is that we can do. And like I said, the ones that I've always gotten, I've been able to just do some kind of contact with somebody and get it resolved. And I've never had to actually go in and do problem solving, except for the one that we had to grieve. But, it's important to just let someone know that that can help you. So on this one, we want to know that you should bring a list of all the duties that you've been doing. And again, update your job description so that you know what you're going to be doing for the next performance review. So any changes that have happened to your job since the last job description was written that you're being reviewed on, if there's been any changes to your job currently, then that's when they should be updating it so that will be part of the evaluation for the next review. And then it's important to take notes. In taking notes, listen to your supervisor. Don't always worry about having, as they say in my culture, and this is my culture, we have a saying that, don't always be working on a comeback, which is a quick answer or a quick response. Just take notes because you will have time to reflect and comment on what is said after your meeting, and you will find that your notes will become invaluable. And in many performance reviews, managers and supervisors say or comment on several things that are not in the review, so you will want to take notes on that too, so that you can always respond to it later. Because we do have supervisors who are very cunning, and they may not put it in a performance review on paper, but they will say it in such a way verbally in that review that it'll still make a worker leave the room feeling really bad, or feeling that they're against them or whatever. And then two, if they mention it and it's not in that performance review, there's always that possibility if they're writing you about a particular thing in that review that's not on paper, but they're just writing you on it, you want to make sure you take notes on that, because you want to be cautious of that they're not going to try to come back later through the avenue of discipline. And so you want to always have that, be aware of that. And then I like to advise people when I talk to them about performance reviews, I like to advise them to save their extensive response for their written response after the review, because that way it gives you time to reflect on what you read, reflect on what was said, and to get your feelings in check. Then you can sit down and write a very thought out response. We just recently had one that I spent an hour and a half with him via Zoom, because this just happened since we've been home, helping him do his response. And so he wanted me, I said, well, why don't you write a draft and then send it to me? I said, and then we will meet on Zoom, I said, and share in a Google Docs and discuss. And by the time we got done an hour and a half later, I had almost rewritten the whole thing, because everything he wrote in there, he wrote off of emotion, and he wasn't having anything to back up what he was saying. So I made him rewrite. We were rewriting it and then putting in details and putting in facts to back up, to support his statements, instead of him just writing it on emotion and using a bunch of you words, which we know that using a bunch of you words puts people on the defense. Although we need to put them on the defense because they're always putting us in that position. You also have rights that before, during, and after a performance review. And one thing to note is that before your performance appraisal, you must be given a 3-day notice so that you have time to prepare for your review. For instance, like my department, the HR person starts sending out the emails in January and they're due in May. But she starts sending in January and she lays out all the benchmark dates for us and our supervisors leading up to that deadline to have that performance review completed, because each stage of it has a deadline date. And I still have my supervisor to this day. She will mention it in one of our one-on-one meetings and then still not schedule it until a month or so later that goes by. And then she'll say, Rosetta, we got to get your review on the calendar. It's almost due. So needless to say, I have one on Tuesday, the 28th. So all this stuff I'm presenting to you today, I will be taking this, my own advice for my review on Tuesday. And then for our department, I don't know if all departments do this because every department does not use the exact same form, but in our department, in the College of Education and Human Development, they have a self-evaluation appraisal form that the employee fills out first. And then there's a deadline for you to get that to your supervisor. And then your supervisor in turn fills out one, and then they meet with you and you go over it together. I have found that if you take the time to really write your self-evaluation and be thorough and brag on yourself, I have found that when you turn it in, there is a tendency that supervisors, especially those that don't know nothing about your job and don't halfway want to do it anyway, will tend to take some or all of your comments and incorporate it into theirs. So you almost, in essence, have wrote your own performance appraisal. And even if they try to word it differently, you can tell that they took what you were saying. And in the event that you do believe that things that your supervisor is presenting during your review sounds like it's headed down the road of discipline, you have the right to stop that meeting and request that a union steward be present because you feel this is leading to discipline. Now, a supervisor, they're so cunning sometimes, but should you, even if you say that, because some people are worried about saying stuff to their supervisor, go ahead and say it. Because should your supervisor come back and say something to you like, oh, you don't need a union representative, this is not going to lead to discipline and this is not disciplinary in nature, then you just reply back to them and say, then it shouldn't be a problem to have my union representative present. I will give you some dates of when my steward will be available. And don't worry about giving that type of answer because that's not being insubordinate and you cannot be reprimanded for making that request because you have the right to do so. Other rights that you have include requesting to know about criticisms, complaints, and reports that are made against you. And you have the right to know who made them. So sometimes in your performance review, again, supervisor will put something that needs areas of improvement. Maybe they say that, talk about somebody's greeting personality or welcoming, or they're abrupt or they're mean or whatever they say, these words that really have no measurement. If they're saying that, sometimes they'll say, well, a couple of faculty members, blah, 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 then you have the right to request who are those faculty members, because you have a right to know that, because you should be able to respond or even ask them to elaborate on, what that situation was. So don't be afraid to ask who made those comments. And if your supervisor tries to tell you otherwise, that they can't tell you that, then contact the union right away and let us know that you're being denied your right. If someone who holds a position higher than your supervisor gets involved and makes changes to your review, then you have the right to see that review after the changes are made. I don't, at least in my department, I don't know this has happened. It usually don't go beyond the supervisor, but again, anytime you know that they're gonna make any kind of changes, whether it's your supervisor or someone higher, ask to see the new copy. And then again, you have a right to respond to your review. So you wanna be thoughtful, thorough, and don't just respond during the meeting. Your response to the review is your chance to add your version of what your supervisor has said in your review. You may not agree with what was said. Your verbatim response should be attached to your review and submitted to your permanent HR file, which will then become a part of your permanent employee record. And I do recommend that if there is someone that you trust, someone that you have confidence in and feel like they will keep things confidential and that they have a good eye, I do recommend that you have someone read your response after you've written it. Because sometimes we are so filled with emotions that the way in which we have written the response is doing more harm than help. And then we have things to remember, and I'm just going to read this right from the thing. Signing the performance appraisal signifies that it has been reviewed with you. It does not signify that you agree with the appraisal. And I know that has become something of a concern for people, because I've, as the chief steward, have gotten called or email and said that they didn't agree with the performance review. The things that their supervisor was saying was all lies, and they're telling me I have to sign this. Do I have to sign it? And then I just referred them to the contract, because this was taken straight from Article 8 in the contract. I remind them that signing the performance appraisal just signifies that it has been reviewed with you. It does not signify that you agree with the performance appraisal. And that is why you also should write your response so it can be attached. We want to also remember that any appraisal that's not in your official personnel file cannot be part of the official record when the employee is considering discipline or future performance reviews. So again, if, say, like a person does your appraisal, we did have I shouldn't even say this, but we had a supervisor in the College of Education and Human Development one time, did a performance appraisal on an employee and did not meet with the employee, and then tried to put it in the file. So it was null and void, needless to say. And then another time, this same supervisor did a performance review, but then never turned it into the official file, and then wanted to discipline someone based on stuff they had said in there. But again, if it's not in your file, they cannot use it for discipline or future performance reviews. And again, that came right out the contract. And then know that you have the right to review your official personnel file upon request, and that's per Article 23 personnel records. A lot of people don't know that, but at any given time, you can do a 24-hour notice is required, I think, but you can officially request to see your personnel file. And I do recommend that everyone, whether you think you're the best worker or you've been told you're the worst worker, periodically should ask to request to see your file just to see what's in there. And then again, if you feel that your performance review violates any of the objectives of a performance appraisal, or it violates the university and the union's shared belief of its purpose, or it includes any disciplinary concerns, I just want you to remember that contact the union and get a union steward involved right away, because the steward can demand a correction through problem solving or grievance. You have to remember that this is a concerted effort. We are a union. We are one. We are strong when we work together. So you don't have to do this alone. As Michael Jackson said, you're not alone. I am here with you. So that's from Michael Jackson and your chief steward as part of the union. And so this concludes my presentation, and I want to thank you for hanging in there with me.